Good afternoon to members of the media. Good afternoon to all Barbadians who are hearing us with their voice and all who call Barbados their home. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. It is a Sunday afternoon, but these times work is 7 days a week. So, but I'd like to welcome the President of the Inter-American Development Bank, my good friend President Moreno, and his team in Barbados, who've done an excellent job and continue to do so. And before we go any further, we're here this afternoon to formally sign a loan that the Inter-American Development Bank has approved for us. But I think it's better coming from the person who has the confidence in us to lend the funds at this stage. And I invite President Moreno to speak to you. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister. It's an honor for me to be here again. I've had the privilege of knowing Prime Minister Mottley for some time. I know how difficult it is, the situation she inherited, but I equally know that when a country makes the decision to, as we say, bite the bullet, it deserves all of the support from the international community. And this is the reason why I came here soon after she took office back in June, and we basically outlined the path forward. Since that, I think a number of things have changed for the better. There is already an approval of International Monetary Fund line of credit. There is a growing confidence in the direction of many of the difficult but correct policies that Prime Minister Mottley is taking. We can see it already with what the rating agencies have done by basically taking the country out of selected default with a positive outlook going forward. And we equally hope that actually next week, our team that does everything related to the private sector, IDB Invest, will be visiting Barbados. And our purpose today is none other than to say, recognize that the work that Marcia, the finance minister, who I know is not here with us today, but just as an example, Prime Minister, we had about $150 million of outstanding loans, very, very slow execution. This year alone, that will turn into $20 million, which today Barbadians can see it in roads, can see it in actual things that are happening to them. And of course, like you, we too worry about the poorest in Barbados. And part of what we're doing here is basically provide the resources that would allow the government of Barbados and you, Prime Minister, to focus on the very poorest, because they shouldn't feel nor carry the weight of this adjustment program. I do believe, however, that there are going to be tough times, of course, but I am optimistic. And I did not want to fly over Barbados on my way to Trinidad without having the privilege of stopping here and knowing that Prime Minister Mottley, from all the time I've met her, there is no such thing as weekends, so I didn't feel as embarrassed to come on a Sunday to sign this very important loan, which is a development policy loan in the amount of $100 million. We will be discussing later with the Prime Minister other areas that we can start to prepare for next year. Because I think this is the opportunity not only to turn the page, to focus on the new Barbados, but really to reform the state, to be able to embrace this huge technological revolution that we're in, to be able to find new sources of growth for Barbados. That's the kind of challenge that we're committed to supporting you and your efforts. So it's my honor, again, to be here with you, Prime Minister, to be able to deliver on a promise that we made back in June, to thank, again, our team, as well as your minister, who had, in a very, very short period of time, worked out a lot of these details. And I know others, like the fund, like the Caribbean Development Bank, will be looking closely at this program. And we all want to see it not only be successful, but equally that this can be a turning point for your country. So again, thank you for the honor of accepting us coming and storming into your office on a Sunday afternoon as we get close to independence of Barbados, which is such an iconic date.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. At this stage, I invite us to both sign the loan, and then I will address a few words thereafter. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much.
much. My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I first would like to once again formally thank the President of the Inter-American Development Bank and for all of your senior management and all of your management in Barbados for allowing us to reach this stage in good time. I've been telling the country for the last week, and we've had good cause to do so, that normal service is resuming. And we have been traveling a road that allows us to see all of the right signposts that we are going in the right direction. We're not yet where we want to be, but we are certainly very much on our way to getting there. And I want to thank all Barbadians because this loan didn't happen by accident. I believe that this special development loan is one of the first that is being granted by the Inter-American Development Bank. It has been triggered by our agreement on both the BERT program and the extended fund facility with the IMF, and therefore reflects that there is confidence in the path that the government of Barbados has decided to choose to get ourselves out of this difficult economic set of circumstances that we inherited. We have, on the 1st of October, gotten, as I said, the agreement of the International Monetary Fund on the extended fund facility, and that saw the disbursement of just over 49 million US, about $98 million disbursed to us. We had a similar agreement from the Caribbean Development Bank, who also agreed to lend us money for budgetary support to be able to get through this difficult time as we seek to restructure our economy. Because remember, one of the primary reasons we went to the International Monetary Fund was to be able to access funds at concessional rates. There are many who say, but why are they borrowing again? When the last government borrowed from Credit Suisse, they borrowed at high rates that had default clauses in it, which were in fact triggered by continuous downgrades by the international rating agencies, such that the rate of interest that we pay or that we are due to pay to Credit Suisse today is significantly higher than that which existed when the government of Barbados entered the terms with Credit Suisse in December 2013. These rates of interest, whether it is from the International Monetary Fund or the Caribbean Development Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank, are significantly lower and concessional. And it allows the country also to be able to create a buffer in our foreign reserves. The governor of the central bank is here, our senior advisor, Dr. Greenidge is here, permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance, director of finance and economic affairs. They all can attest that it is a good moment when, once these funds are received from the Inter-American Development Bank, the government of Barbados will end this calendar year for the first time in a very long time with over $1 billion in reserves. And I'm sure that the governor of the central bank will breathe a little easier when the night comes as a result of this. As I said, we are not yet where we want to be, but we are certainly going along that road. The news that came this weekend from Standard & Poor's that had in fact seen our domestic debt raised, not just upgraded, but upgraded 4 notches with respect to our long-term debt and 3 notches with respect to our short-term local debt, and with a very clear signal that once we complete the discussions on the restructuring of our foreign debt, we are likely to see further upgrades. Psychologically, this is important for the country. The country, regrettably, became accustomed to continuous downgrades to the point of 24 downgrades over the course of just about a decade or so, AG.
That's right.
And that psychologically did a lot to batter us, but worse than that, it caused interest rates to rise, the cost of borrowing to significantly rise, and perhaps even worse than all of that, it triggered the movement of certain companies offshore because a corporate entity could not get a credit rating higher than the sovereign credit rating. And we all know the story of Sagicor, which had to move to Bermuda in terms of its corporate headquarters, in spite of the fact that Sagicor's genesis was in Barbados in the 19th century. That perhaps was the hardest blow of the last decade for us to take. that we are on our way back up 4 notches in one go for long-term domestic debt and 3 notches for short-term is great news, but it is not news that will allow us to rest on our laurels, because we are not where we want to be. And this country must become accustomed again to shooting for the stars, because that is who we are, that is who we've always been. I want to thank the President of the Inter-American Development Bank, because without prejudice to this loan of budgetary support, the truth is that there are a number of other loans that we are currently discussing and working on, as well as seeking to increase the pace of execution on the existing loans. There are 1 or 2 issues that we still have that I think we can work out, but perhaps the most important that the public may be interested in is the one where we are seeking to modernize and digitize government's records, because it has implications for those who have regrettably had to have been laid off in the last few weeks. And we're very clear as a government, this is not a knee-jerk reaction. This is about restructuring our government and repurposing our government. And we believe that if we can modernize and digitize our government, that we can ensure that for that definitive period of time, those who have had to go home will have opportunity to be able to play their part and to be the beneficiaries of any loan proceeds in helping us to literally digitize the millions of pages across ministries that have to be digitized in order for government to be able to move to a paperless government as far as possible. Secondly, that during that period of time, and I'm not in a position to say whether it is 2 years' work or 3 or 4 years' work at this stage, but however long that time is to digitize government's records, then those people ought also to be retrained, whether in the area of medical transcription, legal transcription, or the whole range of services that may be available now for a global economy who wants to look for companies that can provide competitive services to them. And our citizens can do so. Would we, in today's world, create systems that are based on paper? No, we wouldn't. You don't do it, and the government of Barbados cannot do it, however old our systems are and however old our government is. Is it difficult? Of course it is. Is it uncomfortable? Of course it is. And that is why I maintain that I will not rest until we get this loan in place, until we start the process. For those who are not as part of the digitization and modernization part, they will be part of the upgrade. The IDB loan is only one of the 3 loans that we have for capital works on our roads, and we have $100 million in road works, and quite frankly, we're still going to need to raise 1 or 2 more, because the state of our subsidiary roads is in a bad state of repair as well. So it's not just the main highways that have to be done, and we're confident that those people who have regrettably have had to be laid off will find work in the next 4 to 6 months that will allow them to be productive citizens in Barbados, and some of them may choose self-employment. I've just come back from Suriname, and we've signed a economic, technical, and cooperation agreement with Suriname, and one of the major features of it is, and we will be putting out for expressions of interest soon, the Surinamese government is prepared to give us significant tracts of land for Barbadians to farm. We visited farms, acres and acres, and all we could see is pineapples growing in the sand. We visited other farms with all kinds of fruit. And the truth is that the Caribbean shall and should never starve, and should never be wanting for resources and commodities with Suriname and Guyana as a part of the Caribbean community. Our problem is that we need to make it happen, and somebody has to come to work every day to make it happen. Similarly, we need to make sure that our people are exposed to all of the other opportunities that are involved. Suriname exports over 38,000 tons of fish to the European Union, but yet Barbados cannot get a single ton exported because we did not have and do not have the sanitary and phytosanitary measures and labs in place to allow our markets to be certified to be able to export to the European Union. It is a nonsense, because we have one of the most mature fishing industries in the Southern Caribbean. And rather than seek to create from scratch, I've agreed that we will simply seek to speak to CARICOM to certify the Caribbean Agricultural Health and Food Safety Agency as our national agency. And that once we do that with the appropriate labs, it will save us significant sums of money. Why am I saying this in front of the president of the Inter-American Development Bank? Because more than 10 years ago, when we were in government, our government agreed to the establishment of a loan to do this exact same project in Barbados. Minister Griffith was the Minister of Agriculture at the time. The Inter-American Development Bank signed the loan to give us the money, and nothing happened, to the point where the loan was cancelled a few years ago by the last government. Haven't done nothing for years because it literally was signed just before we lost government. This is the kind of thing that should not be a feature of our development, and that if we are serious about accessing funds, we should not be cancelling loans like the one that would have established the Barbados Agricultural Health and Food Safety Lab that would have allowed our fishermen to be exporting to Europe now in the same way that Surinamese fishermen are exporting 38,000 tons a year. Similarly, we should never now be in a position, Mr. President, to have to come back to you to discuss the issue of density of housing in areas such as the Pine and Wildy in Silver Hill and Gall Hill, because regrettably, the housing neighborhood project, which took 6 or 7 years to negotiate, that the government of Barbados regrettably sent back 48 million of the $60 million unused and canceled the rest of the loan. But we now find ourselves in urgent need of similar concessional funds again. And I trust and pray, and perhaps I'm raising it with you on a Sunday evening, conscious that Sunday carries with it the characteristic of mercy and blessings, and that you will not say, but we already approved the loan for Barbados on this matter of low-income housing. But the truth is that, regrettably, the people who need that loan are still there. And the density of housing in our public housing areas is such that it cannot continue. It is causing social problems for families. They are not faceless families. They have names, they have feelings, they're sleeping in shifts, and we need to be able to resolve these problems as a matter of urgency if we are going to stabilize the country and allow us to move to the next level. So we're not going to come back on the agricultural health and food safety because we can designate CARICOM's agency, but we do have to come back on the low-income housing as well as on the modernization and the other good work. So I'd like formally to thank Mr. President. AJ, I don't know if there's anything you want to add. And on our side to say that life is about partnerships. Very often, we can't get as far on our own as we can get when we work in partnership with others. But the fundamental basis upon which partnership is based is trust. And I want to thank you for trusting us enough to move as swiftly as you have moved in all of these matters. I think that you have now scored a record. You are this is your second visit, and we have not yet had 6 months as a government. And the government of Barbados and the people of Barbados have noticed that you have treated us in a way that when we needed our greatest level of assistance, you have been there with us. And on behalf of the people of Barbados, I think that it is my duty, not just in the spirit of independence, but it is my duty to thank you and your team for being as gracious and as cooperative and in supporting the partnership that is the basis for progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Any questions? Everybody's good? Hazel and I was almost about to say that Sunday is truly the day for mercy and blessings. Thank you.
Heather Evanson, Nation newspaper. I just want you to address, if possible, the way the layoffs are being handled in the public sector.
I'll do it again. This
No,
is
do
time
it
number
again,
3.
please.
I did it when I spoke to the CDB loan. I did it last week when I dealt with Mr. Ellis, your related party in the radio station. Look, I have said that I'm deeply disappointed about the manner in which this is done, but it goes even further now. I'm now satisfied that there's an element of sabotage in respect to some aspects of it, and it is not because I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm not blind. There was a recommendation to lay off some people in the health sector, which I vetoed. People did not know that I vetoed it because I've been very, very clear that the basis of the layoffs has to be in areas where we can restructure and repurpose in the way in which I spoke just now with the modernization loan or the capital works, so that we can find people to get work again. Little did we know that that recommendation, which was nothing more than a recommendation, should find itself circulating in social media yesterday morning as a fact, as a fait accompli. And similarly, there have been one or two other instances that have been brought to my attention in the last 24 hours where persons acted without the requisite authority. Suffice it to say that fret not thyself. There will be order and accountability in the government of Barbados. Any other questions?
What about the memo that's been circulating? What about the memo that's been circulating from under the head of the civil service about offering packages to those who want to go now?
I think the head of the civil service has legitimately circulated a memorandum indicating that the government can't offer voluntary retrenchment to everybody, but there is some limited space. Dr. Greenidge and others can tell you that we probably, DFE can tell you, that we probably can accommodate somewhere between 80 to 100 persons. There's a cost to retrenchment. And at the end of the day, we recognize that at the same time that we are restructuring elements of government to make it fiscally fit, that there may be some people who, for all kinds of reasons, may want to go home. And that we should use this opportunity to be able to make that available to persons as well. I also want to say that, look, we have to bring the Barbados public service into the 21st century. My government has committed to changing the framework in terms of how we treat to a protective services commission rather than a police services commission. We have a number of other disciplined hierarchical forces in the country, immigration, customs, prison, all of whom are not treated to in the context of a protective services commission, but are just dealt with the general public administration. That's not good enough because they have peculiar needs, as the AG would tell you. Secondly, we have committed to having and establishing the Teachers Service Commission because we believe that there are issues that are peculiar to teachers and educators that need to be addressed in a more seamless manner. Thirdly, we feel that there may well be a case also for how we deal with the general public administration, but that the rules that inform the management of the public service 50, 60, 70, some instances even longer than that years ago, can no longer. And even though we have a new Public Service Act, we never change the institutional framework. So what happens? Let's take the Public Service Commission alone. They review things, send it up, Mr. President, to the Service Commission, but it comes back down the same limited pipe. And if you have the same public administration department handling all of the recommendations for the Public Service Commission, for the Judicial Legal Services Commission, for the Police Services Commission, they're the same number of bodies handling everything else. So however fast the requisite commissions can work is slowed down because, to use a metaphor, the bandwidth, the size of the pipe is small. And we have therefore now to be able to create human resource departments that are dedicated to your needs. And what are some of the issues? If a person, for whatever reason, has personal matters to attend to in their family, they are forced to take a sick day. They're not sick, you know. They're forced to take a sick day or a vacation day. We have to be able to evolve to 21st century management practices that allow people some level of flexi time. It's done in corporate entities in the country now, that allow people to be able to take leave time up to a period of 7 days, that allows people to be able to organize their lives differently, and how we treat to the public service also. We come into meetings. I've started every estimates meeting by saying what, DFE? That this is not a case where only the minister and the PS is going to talk, that people have to speak, and that we have to liberate our public servants to believe that they take control because they are the leaders of this country. Just as the political class are leaders, the public service are leaders in this country, and they're the ones who have to unlock the creativity and unlock the growth in this country. What was it that secured Barbados' comparative advantage for the last few decades? I want to suggest that it was a combination not just of political leadership, but it was the quality of our public service. Now, when we have a situation in the last decade where more senior public servants retired early, took early retirement than any other period in the history of this country, it causes us to worry. And what it meant was that good people who were not yet at the level that they perhaps could be were catapulted up 2 and 3 ranks above their level without the requisite experience. And very often you need a combination of knowledge and experience to become good. You can't take somebody off the street and just because you give them knowledge feel like they have the same wisdom as somebody who has had a decade of service. So we have now to rationalize the whole thing. And as to the last in, first out, none of us like last in, first out. But the bottom line is, for a public service that has not kept records on people, we do not and did not have the luxury to be able to take time to build up cases, because we have a date with destiny with respect to the management of our financial resources, and everybody is forgetting what is the overall mission. The first mission is to keep Barbados stable. The second mission was to save the value of our dollar, and by extension, perpetuate the stability that we want. I just came back from Suriname. Suriname devalued their dollar 4 or 5 years ago. It went from 350 to 7 SRDs to 1 US dollar. It eventually broke down its IMF program because they were asked not to apply 200 million US dollars in electricity subsidies to its people in a country where people are earning $3 US a day at the banana farms to work in banana production that I met on Thursday in some instances. Now, my simple point to you is that these are not easy decisions, but we feel that we have made a commitment first to stabilize our quality of life, to keep our stability. That means keeping the value of our dollar, so that when you go to the supermarket, you can know that this $200 is going to buy X amount of goods, more or less, but not to have it devalued such that it is worth half of what it was worth, as has happened to the Surinamese people, okay, and other people across the world. Secondly, that we said that the burden has to be shared equally by all parties, from labor to capital to all others. That we have adjustments to make in terms of the structure and the purpose of our government, and that we are doing so as sensitive a way as possible. Because if we didn't do the debt restructuring, the domestic debt restructuring, we would not, one, be able to be limited to only sending home 1,500 people. You've heard the former governor of the central bank continue to lament to today. This week, recently, all the time he is saying what? That we need to be sending home 4,000 to 5,000 people. And my government has said no, that we are sharing the burden fairly. Secondly, it has also allowed us to be able to get the increase, improvement, the upgrade. What does the upgrade mean? That ultimately, even before, and more important than perhaps the government of Barbados borrowing at this stage, is that companies who were potentially looking at leaving Barbados because the cost of money for them to borrow at was significantly higher because of Barbados's low credit rating, can now see a future forward, because the end of the day, the upgrade means that they too can see an upgrade in their own credit profile, and therefore in the cost of money to them. So I'm asking us to recognize that, look, this is not a simple issue, but it's an issue that requires interconnectivity, it requires conversation, it requires adjustment. On Tuesday, I'm likely, or this week for sure, I leave you now to go and meet with the Ministry of Finance and to meet with all of the major accountants in Barbados, because the former Minister of International Business, Mr. Don Villeneuve, and the last government of Barbados gave commitments to the OECD and others that they would dismantle a sector of this economy that has been functioning for over 4 decades and that has been responsible for being the biggest contributor to our corporation taxes in this country. When we left government in 2007, we were getting $520 million in corporation taxes, of which 360 came from the international business sector. Today, we're getting 280 million, a reduction in real terms of about 40%, but more importantly, or 40% of what we should be earning rather, but more importantly, 55% of that comes from the international business sector. Now, we are going to have to make some decisions, and Minister Toppin, thank you, and I thank him for it, wonderfully has started to address this issue to the country last week, that before this December 31st, we have to make changes to our corporate tax rates and to our institutional arrangements, because effectively, our business is now the world, and the world is now our business. But it means that we're going to have to retrain people in every single aspect of this country's work and functioning if we are to be able to be at global levels in terms of saying to President Moreno's compatriots and Juan Luis's compatriots, come to Barbados, Barbados is open for business. They're not going to come here unless the quality of service and the turnaround that they're getting is world class. And if they don't come here, I ask myself the simple question, and I'll repeat it again, the cabinet has heard it. Can we quadruple domestic business in 10 years? Or can we quadruple our international business in 10 years? The answer is self-evident. With a limited population base, we're not going to quadruple the domestic business in 10 years. But we can do so by making Barbados a place of choice globally for people to come and do business, as it has been for the last 40, 45 years with people from Canada. Barbados is the country that ranks number 2 or 3, alternating, for Canadians to do business with the rest of the world. There was a period of time where Barbados was also a favorite for Chinese. There's a period of time where it's favorite for Mexican companies wanting to do work because of our double taxation agreements and our bilateral investment treaties. Now, this is an unsexy area, but what Bajans must understand is that because we were able to raise as much revenue from this area in corporation taxes, it meant that Bajans carried a lighter load with respect to the volume or the amount of taxes that they paid in other areas, because it gave successive ministers of finance elbow room to be able to reduce or to reform the taxes that you and I would have to pay in this country. So these are some of the difficult decisions that we're still making. But the good news is that people are seeing the signs of change. People are confident and hopeful, as we are. And I have every confidence that while we may not always get it perfect, that we are moving significantly in the right direction, and that once Barbadians recognize what is required of them, that they will lift themselves up to help us carry the weight. Okay? Anything else? With that, President Moreno, a little longer than we thought, but
No. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it all.
and I want to say to you that you must always believe that Barbados is a place that you can come and retreat to
Yes.
when you want to get away from the cold of Washington, D.C. So thank you very much once
Thank
again.
you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all very much.